Hello everyone, welcome back to Crafts by the Bow and welcome to my Global Monthly Video Collaboration Group video. As you probably know, I belong to a worldwide group with Stampin' Up members from across the world, and we all choose to use the same stamp set or the same colour scheme, but mainly the same stamp set on the first Wednesday of every month. And October's stamp set is Abstract Impressions. Now this isn't a new stamp set, it was in the annual catalogue for last year as well as this year. But it's one of those stamp sets that's got lots and lots of things that you can do with it. There's all of the flowers that can be 2-step and 3-step stamping. There's little grass areas. Sometimes I've used this, it's stems and leaves, but I've used it on other cards just as a grass image for the front of the card. This little piece here fits on top of these leaves and makes the prettiest flowers with just a little highlight if you stamp over the top. But if you don't want to stamp over the top, that's fine as well. And I love these two sentiments. There's so much to love about you. That's one of the ones I used for my thank you cards this year for a lot of my customers, because it's just such a nice little sentiment. And then today's one that I'm going to use is this, Kindness Changes Everything. And when I got this box out, because I know this stamp set so well, if you look, you can see it's a stamp set I use a lot. Because I know it so well, I thought, right, I'm going to use these rose type flowers here. I had a picture in my head of what I was going to make, and I realised that this stamp and this one I'd never actually used. It wasn't inked. So I challenged myself to use these two and this piece. And I've used it both as a leaf and as the ground on the card for today. But let me show you the card that I actually came up with. So this was the card I made, and this was the little stamp that I used. And I thought it looked a little bit like a tulip. So I used this and then this little part on top, and I double stamped that little part so that it looked like one of those tulips that have like the little double layer of petals. And I've added some ribbon, and it's standing up on dimensionals. It's been through the embossing machine, and I just thought that was a really cute, easy card to make. And then I've stamped a little bit inside and the same on the envelope. So let me show you how we make it. I just move these out of the way. Now, if you're trying to follow the video and you don't get time to write down all the sizings, they're always on my blog, and you can find my blog either on here or at craftsbythebow.blogspot.com. Okay, so my colours that I chose, I was going to use Rococo Rose because that's the ribbon colour that I'm using. And then I took out Merry Merlot, and I love the colours together. And let me show you what I found. If I open the Merry Merlot, and I've taken just the little, the one little stamp, that's the tulip. Okay, so if I stamp it once, and then stamp again, and then stamp again, and then I'll just clean that. But let me show you what happens if you then stamp it again with the Rococo Rose. See how very similar those colours are? And I thought, actually, it's just the perfect match. So I was going to use Rococo Rose, but I like the 3 colours of stamping that I can get from the Merry Merlot. So that's the one I'm going to use. And I am just going to use my little stamp pad today as well. I don't have much paper left in this pack, so I haven't got the amount of cushioning I usually have. So I'm going to use my little stamping pad. And I'm going to use this because I'm doing a lot of stamping off. Okay, now I've got my base card, and this is actually cut at 3 3/4 by 5. And let me find my purpose. This is the green I'm going to use. I was going to use Old Olive, but I actually liked the quite subtle, little bit lighter colour of the purpose. And I've already got all of my stamps mounted so that it makes it a little bit faster. There we go. So I'm going to start with the bigger piece of grass. And I don't want to stamp it full strength, so I'm going to stamp that off each time. Oh, I am going to need a little piece of paper just under here. Let's pop this down here. That's just because I'm stamping off the edge. Let me just do that again. So stamping it off, and I'm going to make these leaves go all the way across the bottom of the card. And don't worry if you get some slightly darker bits, some lighter bits. It will just look quite natural. And while we've got this one out, you could stamp the inside of the card and your envelope. Now you can see I've got a little bit of green here, but that's not going to matter. Oh, I do still need that. So now I'm going to take the smaller of the leaves. Let's see if I can get enough pressure just from this. And I'm not going to stamp off this time. I'm just going to stamp straight down. I think I will stamp on that paper though. And you can see I've got the 2 colours now of the leaves, which is what I wanted. I'm just going to make it go off the paper as well. I don't want to have a white space at the side here. And then remember that long stamp, this one here, I'm going to use it to go across the bottom of the card so that I haven't got this like white part, so that it looks like the leaves are actually coming out of the ground. And I'm just going to stamp off and then go across. And because it's got that very slight curve on it, it just looks a little bit more natural. Now what I did find as well, that if I wanted any longer dark leaves, I could use the end of this so that I have some that are just slightly longer. I didn't want everything to be a uniform length. Okay, I don't need the green anymore. Oh, excuse me. I've had a tickly cough and a sore throat last week, and it's just staying with me a little bit. So I do apologise for coughing. Okay, so now I've got the Merry Merlot, and I've got my little tulip base, and I don't want them all to be dark. I wanted to have different colours, and so I want some that are light. I'm going to do some that are a bit dark, and I'm going to do a dark one over here where I had that little green piece. So now you see it's disappeared. And while I've still got a little bit of ink on there, I'm going to stamp a different one. Okay. So some dark, some light. You could even do a 3rd generation and have a much lighter one if you wanted. I'm just going to put one there, and that's all I'm going to put. So I think I've got 7. Yeah, I've just got 7 going across there. Okay, and at the same time you would stamp the ones inside your card and on your envelope again. Now I don't need that one anymore. So now I'm going to use the one with almost looks like a deer footprint, doesn't it? Just the little outlines there. And I'm going to use some of this full strength. I'm going to use it on the middle colour, on the second one with full strength. And I'm going to do that twice, just so that it looks like that little double row of petals. And I really don't know why I've never used this particular stamp before. Okay, for this paler one, I actually want to stamp off and then use it. I don't want that one to be too dark. Okay. It's difficult to make it show up on the first generation stamping. So what I do is just go over it, and you can see it is a little bit darker just because it's stamped on top of the same colour ink. So you can actually see it, but it's not as vivid as some of the others. Okay, so that's all of the flowers done. And you would do your card inside and your envelope. And then the last thing for stamping is I'm going to do the sentiment. And I've chosen the kindness changes everything. And I'm going to do it over to the left-hand side here. You can stamp that first if you want to have a sort of an area that you know is going to be the sentiment, and then you know how much space you have for the rest of it. This one I stamped full strength, but it was actually darker than I wanted. So this time I'm going to stamp in the same place, but I'm going to stamp off first. I don't want it quite that dark. And I know that that's still going to fit in the corner there. But if you're at all worried, do your stamp in the sentiment first. And then you know just how much room you've got to play with. Okay, so I'm just going to stamp off quickly. And then I'm just going to have this lined up on the grid paper so that I can see whether this is straight. And I'm actually going to have to stand up. So excuse me while I'm just looking. And hopefully it's straight. Yeah, that's just where I wanted it. And you see how it's just that little shade lighter. This would have looked pretty, but I just wanted this to match with my ribbon. And the first generation would have been just a little bit too dark. Okay, so that's all the stamping done. Nothing else to stamp. It really is a versatile little set, this. So I'm not going to need that anymore, I don't think. Nope. We can get rid of that, make a little bit of space on the table. I don't need this, and I don't need that paper. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I've got the Subtles 3D embossing folder, and this is one of the original ones from when Sizzix still made the embossing folders for us. Now, when you order this, it will be a little bit thinner, and you can either put a shim with it, or the blue plate that Stampin' Up sells is a thinner plastic plate that can go in if you have the big shot. Whatever works for you. I don't actually have the blue plate, but I do have some of the new folders, and I find that if I put a piece of the card that comes with a lot of the DSP or in your paper pumpkin kit, that's just perfect for my machine. But my machine has been used a lot and is a little bit loose. Some of the newer machines that haven't been used quite so much, you might find that that piece of card is too thick. So just play around and see which one works for you. Okay, so this I'm going to put into this folder, and I love this line at the bottom so I can see through and I know if it's lined up straight. And then I'm going to put it through the embossing machine, and it goes with this folded end first. If you put the open end in first, quite often the folder will break. There's too much stress on it. So put it in with the folded piece first. Now I have already done that, and here's the piece that's been through already. It's slightly different stamping to the one I had here. This one's much more of a fluid line. This is more in a row, but stamping's never the same twice. So there, that's the piece we're going to need. And then I have a piece of the Rococo Rose card, and this is cut just 1/4 of an inch bigger than this, which makes it 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And that's just going to give us a tiny, tiny little border, which will just pick out the pink in here and just set that off. And I'm also going to put the little bow on. Now, I've got, as I showed you, I've got the Rococo Rose ribbon, and this is the scalloped linen ribbon. And all I've done is tied a little bow, and I've manipulated the tails so that instead of coming down like this, they go behind the bow. Let me just make that more into a bow so that it's more of a straight line. And I want my bow to go across the bottom of my card, and you can either make it so that your bow's in the middle, you can have it at the left, you can have it at the right. I quite like mine at the left because my writing's at the left. So I'm just going to put a little bit of tape on the back. You can use tear and tape. You can use snail. I'm just using up my fast fuse. And I've got quite a long tail on this. I shouldn't have used quite so much ribbon, but there you go. I did. So I will be cutting a little bit of it off though. Okay, so I don't need this, all of this to go across the back. I'll just get my big scissors, chop a piece off. Let's see if that's on there straight. There we go. Chop that piece off. If you find that, you know, your ribbon's a little bit loose or it isn't quite in the right place, you can always put a little glue dot underneath and that will hold it down. Okay, so I'm going to attach it to this piece. And I'm just being careful not to go right up to the edge on here. But I know that it's going to hold my top layer down. And then I'm just going to line it up and make sure I can see like each of the corners have a little piece of the pink card showing. And that way I know it's fairly level. Now you can see my ribbon is a little bit loose. So I'm going to get my, oh, where are they? I'm going to get my little stamping, oh, my stamping dots. They're not stamping dots. I'm just going to get my little glue dots. Now, I think having that cold last week, it's addled my brain or something. Okay, now I'm just going to pop a couple under there just to keep that ribbon still. Now, if you were sending this in the post and you felt like the ribbon would be too thick to go in the post without having extra postage or anything, you certainly don't need to do that. You don't need to put a little bow on. What you could do is just put a piece of plain ribbon all the way across. That would look pretty too. But if it's going to be bulky and you don't want to be paying extra postage, then just leave the little bow off. Okay, now let's go back to the base that we've got. This is just a Whisper White base, and I cut it at 4 1/4 by 11 and then scored it at 5 1/2 because I knew it was going to be a card that I had laid horizontally. And you know, if you've watched me before, that I really like my horizontal cards to fold here rather than at the top, because I find that if you have a card standing like this, over time it will start to splay and it falls down and doesn't look quite so pretty when it's on the mantle. So I like to make mine this way. And I'm going to use my dimensionals behind here just to give it a little bit more of a pop. I'll just give it a little more 3D. This was a sheet of dimensionals from a paper pumpkin kit, and I'm loving this size. I wish Stampin' Up! Would actually give us that kind of size and availability. But maybe if we all write to the sandbox enough times, they might give us bigger sheets of the Stampin' Dimensionals. So I have loved having those big sheets. Okay, now I'll just check that my base is the right way. Just get my card here. Try and make sure that I've got it evenly spaced. There we go. And then last of all, I've got some of our adhesive backed sequins, and I really liked this pale green one, but when I put them on my last card, I thought they were actually a bit too pale. So all I did, let me move my stamp box and find my blends. All I did was I used my old olive. I know this is Pear Pizzazz that I was stamping with, but the old olive is so similar. And I just coloured over a few. And then once they've dried, that's the ones that I'm using. So I'll take off some that have dried though, not ones that I've just done. I've done it in the past where I've picked up one that I've just coloured and I end up with, you know, all the colour on my finger. So I'm just going to pop 3 on. You certainly don't have to do this part, but I just like how it draws your eye and matches the green colour too. There. So there we are. That's my little abstract impressions card for today and my matching envelope. Let's pop those together. It's always pretty when you have an envelope that matches, and the first thing somebody sees is either a picture that or an image that you've stamped or the paper on the back, and I think it makes all the difference. It just adds that kind little touch. Okay, so make sure that if you get chance, you have a look at the other links to the videos from the ladies who are in the video collaboration group. All of the links I will leave on the YouTube part of my video, and you could click on those and go and visit and see what everybody else came up with abstract impressions. I don't see them before you do, so they all go live at exactly the same time on the first Wednesday. So mine go live at 7 AM, but depending on where you are in the world, the other people's will be going live at that exact time too. And I like to spend time and see what everybody else has made, and then think, oh wow, look, oh I wish I'd thought of that. So it's a really fun group to belong to, and it's really nice just to see what other people come up with. So I hope you have fun with that set, and if you'd like to give me a thumbs up and a share, that would be fantastic. Thanks very much everybody for watching, and I'll see you all again later this week. Bye bye.